Welcome back to All About Money on HKIBC. I am Chloe Fong. Joining us today via Zoom in Shanghai is Mr. Hanshen Lin, Assistant Professor of Finance at York University Shanghai. Thank you for your time, Mr. Han.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So first, let's talk about the business sentiment in Shanghai, especially from the multinational companies. Can you first run us through about the scale of the companies in Shanghai? How many MNC are there in Shanghai? And how are the multinational companies adapting to the lockdown that has been lasting for 3 weeks?
So I'll start off with the last question first of how they're adapting. I believe most of the management, they're focused on taking care of their staff to make sure that they're properly good state of mind, and in many cases, to make sure they have enough food. So for example, I just spoke with a CEO yesterday morning who said out of her 300 staff in Shanghai, the CEO is making it a full-time job to make sure that everyone is okay. Now, related to the sentiment, well, regarding MNCs in Shanghai, there are several thousand, and most of them are part of various chambers of commerce, one of which is the American Chamber of Commerce, of which I serve on the Board of Governors. And recently, the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, they put out a survey really to capture the sentiment of all of the different members. And so in looking at the COVID situation, let me read off a couple of highlighted statistics to give you a sense of that sentiment. In general, overall, about 99% of the respondents out of a total of 160 or so said that they were impacted by the outbreak in many ways. About 60% stated that they had production slowdowns, of which within the manufacturing side, 82% reported slowdowns. In terms of revenue projections, about 54% have stated they think 2022 revenue will likely show a downhill trend, of which 38% said it may be a bit too early to estimate the full impact of revenues. And perhaps most interesting, from at least an investment side, 29% of the correspondents have delayed investments because of the COVID outbreak, and another 30% have said it's too early to tell, but over half of the respondents do think that if the continuation happens with the lockdown, they may need to reduce investment in China over the coming year. So that gives you a kind of a sense of the high-level sentiment. Everyone is trying to do their best. Everyone understands the government is trying to do its best, but certainly, everyone hopes for the best.
I wonder, in terms of different sectors, what are the sectors that have been hit the hardest from the current wave in Shanghai?
Well, when I look out the Shanghai window, everything is very quiet, including all the restaurants, a lot of the hospitality businesses, and so forth. So certainly the retail sector has had quite a bit of impact. But perhaps the biggest challenge when we look at it is really on the logistics side, specifically in the area of trucking. Currently in trucking right now, when we look at the movement capacity of trucks, there have been various analysis that say the movement of truck capacity has dropped about 30 to 40%. And this has a large impact in just the movement of goods in general. But perhaps one of the main challenges is the fact that when trucks can move within China, that's one issue. But the flexibility and freedom for trucks to move to other regions, that is a different challenge. So for example, just within the Yangtze River Delta area, various cities, Suzhou, Kunshan, Haining, have made announcements forbidding Shanghai trucks from entering this city. So as transportation costs start going up, we're also being impacted by rising fuel costs as well. And hopefully these will moderate over time. But as long as the logistics and movement of goods is hampered, that actually will affect all sectors.
Right. And we actually see some technological companies, they are rolling out some innovations to help with the logistic issues as well. For example, some companies are rolling out the drone services or some using some machines or robots to help with the transport. I wonder, can you share more about the details about this aspect, as well as how are other businesses adapting to the current situation?
So essentially what you're talking about is delivery to the last mile, making sure that the final product reaches the final consumer. Part of the challenge is just the issue of moving goods from factories to ports and vice versa. So in this sense, you are absolutely right that technology is trying to look for ways to be able to simplify the logistical related issues. But ultimately, the challenge is going to be on the government side, on the standardization of various regulations that permit the movement of transport of goods. And so in that sense, that's really the key issue, because as we look at the overall logistics of China, it's actually a situation where the ocean transports are fairly stable. The air carrier transportation logistics are fairly stable. It's primarily the on-the-ground trucking situation that seems to be hampering the movement of goods and therefore hampering the economy.
Right. And let's also talk about the inflation at the moment. I wonder how will the current situation of the inflation, like the higher levels of inflation, affect local businesses from your point of view?
So that's actually a very good question, because when you think about inflation, there is the inflation number itself, such as the official CPI index, which suggests that inflation in China might be closer to 2%. And yet we actually see that in practical day-to-day situations, there is a rapidly rising fuel-related costs, food-related costs, and so forth. The challenge of inflation is this, that it raises expectations and therefore raises prices. And what we don't yet know is how fast inflation rates will rise. And we haven't yet seen an expectation of wage growth either. If it starts showing a situation where universally wage growth shoots up, raw materials and commodities continue to shoot up, then that will be a challenge. But when we think about the small and medium enterprises today, at least front and center, they're really focused on just managing and surviving the lockdown.
Thank you so much, Mr. Han, for your insights. Now, let's also invite Mr. Frank Tsai, the founder of China Crossroads, also lecturer at Emerson Business School, to join our program to talk more about the expat community in Shanghai during the lockdown period. So, welcome to the program, Frank.
Thanks for having me on your program.
So very quick, let's get straight to the point about the expat community in Shanghai during this difficult time. I wonder, how is the sentiment among the expat community at the moment?
Well, I've seen some Snap surveys by different retailers asking expats if they want to leave or not, and many of the numbers center around 40% who want to leave very soon, like as soon as the lockdowns ended. The 30%, they say they plan to leave. Now, that's a very interesting figure because I think we can divide this expat group into two parts. One is the part that really hasn't fared well in the 2 years of COVID. I mean, they have to travel internationally, see their family, and they're just very frustrated. I think this is the last straw for them. This shows that they can't sustain this life. I think another group are people who were not as inconvenienced by the pandemic. And so I think we have to take these numbers with a grain of salt because it's very shocking to be in lockdown and not be able to go out. And maybe, after things end, and if they end successfully, no more rolling lockdowns, something of the experience we had before this outbreak, then I expect that 40% number to go down.
Okay. I wonder, what do you think the policymakers should do to maintain the overseas workforce and talents?
Sure. I mean, let me just preface this by saying that I run the largest platform of public lectures in Shanghai. And so a large part of my revenue is from in-person gatherings, and a large part of that audience is expats. So the fact that I'm in the events business means that I'm kind of the canary in the coal mine. So, my business is most sensitive to these lockdowns compared to other businesses. So, you'd asked about policy. Of course, first of all, we have to make sure there are not the kind of rolling lockdowns that we saw in the West. And, I understand that where you are in Hong Kong, during this 2 years, there have been a lot of bans on large gatherings. We haven't actually experienced that here. So if there are rolling lockdowns here, that's going to, be a very big change for us in a way it wouldn't be for you. So, number one, the policy has to be to make sure that this is a place that expats still want to live in the long term.
We will definitely keep monitoring the ongoing situation, and hopefully the situation will get better soon. Thank you very much for all of our two guests' suggestions today. We'll be back on HKIBC next Sunday. I'm Chloe Fong. Until the next time.